Hello, CSL. How's it going? It's Coach Fury here, and we're back today to talk, as we have been for the past few video classes, about the CSL Draft. As you can probably see from the screen that we've got up, we're currently more or less towards the end of the first round. So we're going to have a little chat about that. And today I'm joined by videocast regular now, I can say, Tim. How's it going, Tim?
Good.
And I'm also joined by a newcomer, Andre, from the general manager of the Memphis Grizzlies. Andre, how's it going today?
Not too bad. Thanks for having me.
Good. Okay, so I mean, the floor's open to you guys, really. I mean, I think before we sort of start talking about other teams, let's kind of open up the floor to both of you and see how have you guys been going? Because I know you've both had a couple of selections now. You can see probably Memphis down there in 19th, picking the point guard David Michinu. I think that's how you say it. And then the LA Lakers a little bit higher up in this draft, picking Skal Labrasuri. Should we start? We'll start in order. I mean, Tim, what was your thought behind that selection? Is it a need, or is it just the best player available? What's your thoughts behind your pick so far, and how the draft's been going for you?
It was really based on need. There were three guys that I was really looking at for the selection. I was looking at Skal, I was looking at Greek Papa, and I was looking at Beasley. One of the big problems that we had last year was our offense was absolutely terrible. I mean, it was basically Shabazz Napier, and that was pretty much it. So I kind of took a look at how I saw the draft playing out in the second round and how I saw the positions being distributed. So then for me, it really came down to which big man do I want? And I went back and forth between the two, back and forth. Was really undecided. And then the youth league happened, and Skal was absolutely amazing there, both in the regular season and the playoffs. And so that really kind of cemented it for me. I also really love his handling as a big man. I always like having good handling across the positions, across the board. And with his jump shot and scoring and his rebounding will be better than people think it is. And I love the fact that he could play all three front court positions. He's got that 6'11", 225-pound frame, which is perfect for being able to play small forward, power forward, center. So even though Papa filled some more needs for us because he has shot blocking as well, which we desperately need. I felt like Skal was really the guy to go for when I summed everything up, but it was really close between those two.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I can certainly understand the selection. I mean, from following some of the teams you've had in other sim leagues, I know firsthand how important handling big man is to you, and the way you like to build your franchises up. So certainly be interested to see how he does. If we sort of head further down the board towards Andre's pick, obviously Memphis a little bit further down, being a playoff team. What was the thought behind your pick? You happy with your selection? Or was it sort of, again, it sounds like it's a bit of a need, but just wondering whether you still felt that David M was the best player available?
Well, best player or not best player, I don't know. I didn't scout everybody, but definitely need. And as Tim said, handling is very important. And for me, handling for a point guard is very important. And looking at this guy, a few scouting that I've done for Missionau, I had 2 full reports for him. I thought that his handling would be somewhere in the 80, I don't know, maybe early 80s or mid 80s.
Basically, he has the second highest handling in the class, and his potential there is in the mid to late 80s. So he's phenomenal.
Yeah. And so right now I have no point guards at all, right, on the roster, because 2 of my point guards from last year, that is Yogi Ferrell and Pat Beverly, they're both free agents, right? And Beverly is somebody I really like. He started all my games at point guard last year. He just like Missionau, he has good handling, or in the 80s. and some good defense, especially steals. So that's pretty much what I'm looking at. I'm hoping that Mishnah will be something similar to Pat Beverly, hopefully a little bit better in passing. I know he can't shoot. That's a concern, of course. But I'm hoping to start him next to Middleton, or at least play him next to Middleton and the likes of Marble. Both of them are pretty good shooters. So let him drive and dish to the guys on the perimeter. Yeah, so definitely a needs base, and I also have another pick, so hoping to maybe get somebody else in there, although quite late.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was obvious that you were always going to be looking at point guards in this draft, because that is your biggest need, certainly. But for me personally,
But let's say
yeah, go on, Tim.
I have a question for Andre. I know you were kind of trying to decide between, okay, do I go point guard or do I go wing, and what ultimately was the deciding factor? Because you had some great defensive wings available as well.
Yes, and it's a very good question. And I feel I really needed to go for the point guard, and I really liked this guy. And since he was available, I thought I have to go, right? I mean, I have 3 or 4 wings on the team already that are very defensive minded. Like have ratings in the 70s and early 80s for defense, and something like 60s, 70s in steals. So adding more there, I'm pretty much just drafting to trade. And that's not necessarily what I want to do right now. So I decided to go for a point guard, somebody I can take, somebody I can develop and keep, right? I know that maybe he wasn't necessarily the top point guard available, but I definitely liked what he brought already. And in terms of his height, weight, I feel like this is a guy I can just put in there. I don't know if he can start. We'll see. I'm obviously hoping to resign Beverly. But definitely somebody I can put in there into the lineup and get him to play straight away. Hopefully even good minutes.
What I was going to say was, for me, from this draft, it'd be interesting your selection, because obviously being a playoff team, he's going to go in and next season. So from a rookie standpoint, I don't expect him to be competing for rookie of the year, but if he starts and gets games, he certainly, if he manages to get the minutes. So that would be fun to watch, certainly.
Well, depends on where he is in terms of his development. If he starts, he may be competing for the rookie of the year. You never know. Yeah.
Personally, I think rookie of the year is Teodosic to lose, just from his impact in the youth league and the fact that on that Washington team, he's going to be the alpha dog, also playing point guard, and point guards have a tendency to take more shots than other positions relative to their scoring ratings, simply because they have the ball in their hands more.
Yeah, certainly Teodosic is the front runner for rookie of the year. If you're looking at all of the draftees that are coming through, he's the one who he's got the right situation, the right fit, and he is the most developed probably out of all of the guys coming into the league. So certainly.
How is his durability, Teodosic?
Good, from what I remember. I don't have the screen in front of me right now, but one thing in particular about this class is that a lot of guys have really great intangibles, especially compared to some other classes. So, his durability is going to be fine.
Okay, cool. So that's nice to hear a little bit about what your both your thoughts processes were for the guys you selected. So what I thought we'd do for the rest of this video cast is just sort of throw some statements out there and just get some ideas flowing, really. So first one I want to start with, so looking at the guys who've obviously been selected so far, and we can't comment on the guys who are still available, but who would you say is probably the best selection so far? The one that you think stands out across that board so far? Can be for any reason.
Well, I can say I really like your selection of Ingles on 23rd. Somebody definitely I was looking at, and looking at his combine and the different youth league results that I've seen throughout the year. He's a very intriguing talent, right? With his obviously his defense and 3-point shooting, something that's there. But he stands out with his amazingly high passing rating, and in youth league he has shown something that I've personally never seen, where a small forward averaging 8 or even 9 assists a game. So you put him in there into the starting lineup with that passing rating. Wow, I don't know what kind of impact he's going to have. Certainly well above the usual 3 and D player.
Yeah, definitely. I'm kind of in the same situation where I think Inglis is one of those guys where, even though in terms of total talent level, I would say he was probably picked the right spot in that regard. But in terms of the uniqueness of his skill set, he probably should have been a lottery section. I didn't see him as a top five player. I know a lot of mocks said, top five to Golden State, maybe top 7 to Portland. You wound up getting him anyway. But, I thought there was too much talent available for him to go there. My personal favorite pick in this draft is Beasley to the Phoenix Suns. Excellent value, never should have escaped the lottery, and he is a perfect complement to all the defensive monstrosities that Phoenix has. It's like, so even though his defense is probably going to be really bad, I personally compare him to Nick Stauskas, Klay Thompson, that type of player. On some teams, that lack of defense would be out of concern. On Phoenix, who gives a shit? He'll go out there, he'll score points, he'll convert from all 3 levels with really high accuracy, and he's going to be amazing. Depending on how Doug uses him, I could potentially see him as Phoenix's number 1 or number 2 scorer as recently as his rookie season. He's that brilliant offensively.
Yeah, and sorry, let me just jump in there, and I'm sure Doug will find the best way to use this guy. We all know how good Doug is. But one thing about Beasley is that I see him as a very good pick specifically for the Suns. All right, if somebody else picked him, then maybe his value wouldn't be that high. And I'm not a big fan of these guards, forwards that can't defend, the likes of Zach LaVine. That's who he reminds me of anyway. So I always find a good way to throw in an aggressive score on LaVine, and essentially the guy will score a lot of points but give up even more. So that may happen with Beasley, but not on the Phoenix Suns, because they can throw in defenders where required and put in Beasley so to utilize him best.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder with Beasley how much playing time he will get as the season goes on. So obviously Phoenix have a pretty good rotation, a pretty deep rotation at the moment, but most of that rotation relies on them being a good defensive player and generating blocks, steals. And Beasley's a bit of a completely different type of player that they've acquired here in comparison to what they have currently. So yes, I think he'll get minutes early on, but I think he's one of those players that Doug in particular will become quite frustrated with, because he's not as impactful as he may look on the offensive end in comparison to the amount of or lack of defense that he will probably play. So see how that one plays out. For me personally, I think the best pick or the best value pick in this draft so far was number 11, Philadelphia, picking Damian Jones. So I think that looking at his fit in Philadelphia, he'll go straight in and play starting minutes at centre. And I think he's the type of player that they desperately need, someone who can lock down the paint for them. So I think that might help Philadelphia improve dramatically next season to what they were. I mean, they had issues last season where possibly they should have been a little bit more micromanaged. But I think with him going in there, they certainly should be looking more like a playoff team next year. than they are
Yeah,
currently.
yeah. Personally, I had Damian Jones as a top 10 player, um, and I really think there was a situation where he could have very easily gone top five. There's a reason. People pay attention to my mock drafts. There's value in them, and there's sometimes less smoke there than in other mock drafts. Sorry, Curtis. Um, so yeah, that was excellent value, and I think we're seeing a situation in the East overall where the competition for playoff spots is going to get much tougher. There's some teams in the East that I thought could have had much better drafts than they did. But overall, based on the distribution of East versus West, especially at the top and mid range of the draft, that's a lot of talent coming in that's really going to elevate the conference to a higher level. And I personally would not be surprised to see a team over 500 miss the playoffs in the East. I think we're seeing that much of an upgrade of talent in this draft. Obviously there's still free agency to go, and based on the numbers of teams with cap, that the situation could change dramatically. But as of this standpoint, the East is really on the rise based on how the draft is played out.
Yeah, I think certainly. I mean, the East had quite a lot of picks, high picks in particular. So certainly we should see the East improve this year. So let's move on. So we've said who we think the best selection is. So who do we think, looking at the board so far, is probably the most questionable selection out of everyone so far?
Go ahead, team.
Okay. Yeah, Jacob Poto, number 4, Atlanta. Sorry, Andrew. Happy birthday, by the way. But the problem is, this is what happens when you don't scout and you develop this attitude of, well, it doesn't matter who I pick. They're all going to be about the same impact. Well, no. Polito is one of those guys that I personally had ranked in the 20s. And even the guys who had him as a sort of mid first, kind of late lottery, mid round selection, as I know some GMs did, picking him at number 4 when you have so much other talent available is just ridiculous. And I think it's going to be even worse because uh, Palato will be terrible offensively. Yes, he has a high uh, dunk rating and dunk shooting percentage, but his FGI is one of the worst I've seen, and his FGJ is literally the worst I've ever seen. I've never seen a jumper rating that low. Like as in so bad, I will be shocked if he breaks 10% from jumpers. And he cannot rebound the ball in terms of offense. He's phenomenal defensively, but will never get any second chance points. And he will generate turnover after turnover after turnover, especially since his scoring rating is much higher than, say, Jones, for example. So for me, that was a really blown pick and really shows the importance of scouting, especially in this draft class where, because there's the distribution of talent is such that fit really matters. And having that sort of defense and inefficiency when you've already got Winslow on the team, well, I think Atlanta is pretty much going to be in the cellar of the Southeast for a few years to come. That's partly by design, tank Atlanta, tank until you get a superstar. But when you look at what they could have done, otherwise, it's heartbreaking, to be honest.
Okay. Yeah, and you see him. So you think he's like a high scoring, low efficiency type of player?
Well, he's not high scoring. He's a mid range scorer. Yeah, he'll be in the 50s for scoring. But
Okay. Okay.
But even when you have a guy in the 50s for scoring, when he's going to be that bad, you want him taking as few shots as possible, as opposed to Jones, who is going to be inefficient. He's going to be efficient. Jones will, and his scoring is in the mid-30s, but which is perfectly fine. He'll make what few shots he gets. But for me, the thing with Jones is, even though his defense isn't to Palatell's level. Palatell has literally the highest potential defensive rating I think we've seen come through the class. In terms of shot blocking, they're equal. So, but Jones is also a phenomenal offensive rebounder, so he brings that total package.
Yeah. So maybe he'd remind me a little bit of Izili, slightly less rounded. So my kind of a defensive-minded player with a little bit too high scoring rating and low efficiency.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that. Go on, Andrew. Go on.
And I just wanted to ask Tim one more quick question in relation to him. So looking at the screen right now, how the draft has worked out, and sorry, my kids are screaming in the background. Where would you have picked him? So now we're at 27. So out of these 27, where would you drop him?
Oh, that's an interesting question. That's also based on team needs. Well,
I wasn't considering 23. So.
Yeah. Personally, the very highest that I would have slotted him would have been to Phoenix at 17 as an heir apparent to Larry Sanders, because Larry Sanders is getting up there in age. They could use a replacement backup, and I think he could have done well there.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. Do you think Phoenix has enough of a scorer so that to minimize his attempts?
Well, since they pick up Beasley, now they do. Well, I think, well, personally, essentially, there's a scenario in which, I'm not going to spoil trades or anything, but there's a scenario in which they could have gotten, if the draft had played out a little bit differently, potentially both Beasley and Palatell within that range. So, yes, the scores would have been there, between Beasley, Bledsoe, etc.
Okay, that's interesting. And sorry, I won't comment on the pick that I find as being the worst, because I certainly didn't scout everybody, and I can't say who doesn't belong where they are, right? I think everybody were a little bit surprised by Dennis, who obviously created the draft, as picking Trice number 12. Yeah, I think based on the comments that I saw, that people didn't rank him as the top remaining point guard out there, but I suppose the same could be said about my pick on Mishnau.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all forgetting the worst, in my opinion, the worst pick of this draft is the LA Clippers missing their time slot. So that's a team that made a huge, basically tried to burn out a lot of their players towards the back end of last season to try and make the sort of 8th seed in the Western Conference. And it's a team that could really, really use some talent, any talent really, to help them get over that hump. And they could have easily picked up someone, looking at Corinder or even Payson there, they could have picked up someone who would have helped them. There's probably other people who have not been selected yet who could have helped them as well. But that's probably in my opinion, the worst pick, because they didn't make a pick. The questionable pick that I have that was a head scratcher for me was number 16 Miami picking Joshua Smith. So they'd obviously already picked Simmons and Bender 1 and 2, bit of a no-brainer there. But for me, I felt a bit of a head scratcher they didn't go for one of the wing players that were available. Just looking at who came after 16, right the way down to sort of 23, I was surprised that they picked Joshua Smith. I don't know whether you guys thought that as well.
Well, keep in mind also that they drafted Hamilton at number 8. So I think that kind of plays into it as well. Because Hamilton I see as a guy who can definitely play 1 to 3. And if he were a little bit bigger, we would be talking about 1 to 4. So, there's that aspect of it. Personally, to me, I've said this before, I think Bender at 2 was a bit of a blown pick. I really think they should have gone Teodosic, because then I think that Smith pick would make perfect sense. Yes, he needs about 9-10 years to go from Fatty Smith to being somewhat less Fatty Smith, and improving defensively. I can see the rationale behind it. The idea that they'll probably go with, I think they said Murray, Hamilton, Bender, Simmons, Smith as their starting lineup, which theoretically makes sense and will be able to take advantage of Bender's 3-point shooting and passing. That, especially the 3-point shooting, would be lost at power forward just based on the way the engine works. So I can see the rationale behind it. And I think the idea is similar to Atlanta, continue sucking until, in Miami's case, you get a point guard that fits. Problem is, I'm looking going, you could have had Teodosic. So, that's kind of my thinking on it.
So Smith has been hyped quite a lot earlier in the draft, especially for his defense. So, Tim, what is it that he's going to bring to Miami?
Sorry, which one, Smith or Hamilton?
Smith.
Yeah, Smith will bring a lot of rebounding, shot blocking, in theory, defense. He's a very efficient player. I love his efficiency. It's amazing. He won't score enough, really, to have as great an impact on that end as you might think. But the reason he dropped is because he's 383 pounds.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
that has an impact defensively. And we saw that in the playoffs when a player we won't name did really well against him, even though based on the ratings, that's not supposed to happen. And that's because of the size issue. So he needs to lose weight before and for several seasons before his defense ratings production catches up with the ratings just because of the weight.
Yeah. Well, I like him, right, based on what I've seen, but I see him even right now as an impact player, but a player that you really need to coach, right? I don't see him as a player that Psychological can just drop into the starting center and just roll with him for the entire season, because he'll just get abused by people who will see him and just try to coach around him. So I think Psychological needs to put him into different kind of matchups where he can succeed against players that are not very high drive rating, players that prefer to post. That would mean that Smith can actually defend him. Otherwise, he'll be just a liability defensively. And since, as you said, he's not a great scorer, then really he's not giving you much when he's on the floor, right?
Right. Yeah. I can definitely see that. Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to ask in relation to Hamilton. You said that he can play even point guard. So what is his handling, passing that you see based on the scouting?
Yeah, I see him, if I remember correctly, uh, very high 60s passing, low to mid 70s handling.
Oh wow, really?
So,
70s?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can really put him anywhere on that perimeter, and he will produce. He's one of those players where, you know, there's not an elite skill there, but there's a lot of well-roundedness that will make them an effective player. So you have guys like Hamilton, you have guys like Cormaz, Inglis, all those guys I would put in the category of the sort of well-rounded player, nothing elite, but no weaknesses either, type of player in this draft that will do uh, some really good things for the team. Obviously, Inglis is a little bit different because of his high passing rating, but I think I would put Cousins in that category as well. Very well-rounded player that a lot of teams would like to have. Problem with Cousins is he doesn't have elite 3-point range, and there was something else that was a little bit lower than you would want for a pure point guard, but very versatile players who can contribute on a lot of different facets for their teams.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say Hamilton's one that I didn't really look at probably as much as I should have, considering he drafted after me. But from going back and looking through the scouting reports I did have of him, he had some quite good potential as well to gain. So whilst he had some good overall skills now, which meant he could come in and as Tim said, play multiple positions, he also had some room to grow as well. I think, was that right, Tim? Did you see that on your reports as well?
Yeah, he's got potential. Like right now, obviously he doesn't have those passing and handling skills. He has to develop those, but the potential is definitely there. And speaking of, since Andre and I mentioned the thought process behind our picks, I'm just curious. I know we talked a little bit about it on Facebook, but what your thought process, Chris, was behind drafting Ellenson at number 7?
I knew you was going to throw that in there. I was waiting for this. I was waiting for you when you were going to find a good moment to slide it into the conversation. So well played in turning the conversation on its head. So the thought process behind Ellington was very simple. So in my head, I had 4 guys that I was looking to select. Ellington was one of them. I was quietly hoping that Korkmaz would slip down. I thought that if he slipped past Golden State, if you didn't take him over Scala Bisseri, then I might have a shot at him. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. So basically looking at Ellington, looking at his youth league games and his ratings, I'm really interested to see how he does, because he seems like quite a high volume, efficient 3-point shooting at the moment power forward. But I think with some weight reduction, he could also play the 3 as well. I know he's got some slight problems with I think it was his handling ability that means he might be matchup restricted at the 3. But my thought with this is that for my team in particular, we've got a good balance of players who can handle the ball, who can play decent enough defense, and our sort of guard situation is driven on driving to the basket. And we kind of needed another player who could step out and hit the 3-point shot to stop us from being zoned a lot. And I felt that he fitted pretty well there. Obviously, we've got.
So
yeah, go on.
Yeah. So how do you see him and Muradic playing out? Are you going to be hunting for a center so that you can, for example, have either Ellenson or Muradic lose weight and shift one of them to the 3 and have the other power forward?
So I think in an ideal situation, it'd be nice to have one who's versatile enough to play the small forward or the power forward position. That's the plan with this, because one of the things I noticed last season was we didn't really have a natural player to play the 3 behind Hayward. And that meant that Hayward was having to play some quite heavy minutes, and probably meant that his efficiency dropped a little bit towards the later end of the season when we lost, when we traded Kevin Durant. So the thought is that we'll keep both, look at which one would be better suited to playing multiple roles, and then try and sort of develop him to play those 2 roles. Obviously, one of the things we'll need and we'll be looking out for is a centre who can grab balls and rebound and just be a bit of a nuisance, really. Looking at the other guys that I had and was looking at, I thought Ellison was the best player available in that he can probably make the biggest impact out of the guys around him immediately.
And let me show you something. I don't know, Tim, can you see the screen?
I can see the screen, yeah.
You can. Okay. So let me just switch very quickly to my combine file, right? So I pick up the combine file. I put in filters on top of every category, and then I sort them by by highest to lowest. And all the highest ones I highlight in green. So then I have a player per row, and I see what is it that their strengths are compared to the rest of the class. So when I look at Ellenson here, and obviously this is just the combine, I didn't actually scout him, so I don't know much beyond that. But this usually works out quite well. I see that he is, in terms of efficiency, in every single field goals rating, including free throws. Right? He has high scoring to go with that, high defensive rebounding, defense and steals, discipline pretty good as well. So looking at that looks pretty damn good to me.
Yeah, I think it's worth just also saying, so Ellison as well, one of the things we'll have to work on with him in terms of his preferences is try and get him to post up a little bit more. I think he could be a bit of a nuisance then if he had a bit of balance to his game. I think he's quite dependent on sort of driving and three-point shooting. So if we could get him to post up a little bit more, we might be able to make a bit more of an impact of his game. But yeah, no, I'm really interested. I'll be looking forward to seeing what he does because I think he's also got quite a high scoring rating as well, which means he'll get the shots hopefully that he needs. So I'm looking forward to seeing how he does for us.
Yep.
Good player anyway. Good luck.
Yeah.
So we sort of talked about best, worst player. I mean, in terms of teams, I mean, which team? I mean, obviously Miami have had quite a lot of picks. Boston have had quite a lot of picks. Brooklyn have had back-to-back. But I mean, in terms of franchises that have sort of had a lot of picks in this round, which ones do you think have had made sort of the best improvement? I mean, we could probably talk about Miami and say that immediately they've made the best improvement because they've taken Simmons, Bender, and Hamilton. But out of the other guys, I'm interested to see what franchises do you think have had a good draft so far?
Well, as Tim said, I'm looking forward to what's going to happen with Washington. I think they were maybe a player or two away from getting into the playoffs, and now with Teodosic, the most developed player, the clear starting point guard for the team, right? And they already have some young pieces there already. So with him, they may be going up there in the top 8, maybe top 5 even. We'll see.
Yeah, personally, my favorite team this draft is probably Phoenix. Doug already posted about it in one of the picks. So, they got Beasley, they got Whitehead. They'll be getting Whitehead via trade, who personally was my second-ranked point guard in the class after Teodosic, and they got him at 18. And then, so they got two excellent value selections back to back there. Isaiah Taylor, I'm less fond of. I was very surprised to see Doug take him and pass on a wing. And maybe not necessarily in terms of competing for a title immediately, although I think Beasley could be that missing piece. They really needed that offensive guy to be able to take over, especially when they have injuries like they did this year with Austin. But from my standpoint, I'm looking at, okay, what do you do, for example, when Bledsoe is the first one that comes to mind? Sanders, well, they didn't draft center, but just in terms of as some of their key pieces are getting older, a lot of teams transition from championship to rebuilding. Well, with these selections, Phoenix is putting themselves in a position where they can have a continued spell of dominance in the Pacific, even further. And it's become a situation of, okay, when do we see somebody other than the Suns in that, and the Kings either winning or in the top two of that division? So from a longevity of success standpoint, I absolutely love the Suns draft.
Yeah, and I think the Suns are one of the teams that I think if you asked them in particular that they needed some depth, and they kind of it was kind of highlighted in the playoffs with the injuries and in sort of towards the end of the regular season, and certainly with the guys they've picked, hopefully if they do get any injuries next season, they can start to fill those places with guys who can have an impact, certainly. So I mean, looking at Beasley, I'll be interested to see how he does and how many minutes he gets. But for me, I think Taylor's the one that out of the selections they've made, he's the one that I think could be the sort of the ace in the pocket for them if he gets the minutes.
And just a question to you guys in relation to Brooklyn. I'm looking at 13th and 14th there. So Siakam, looking at his combine and his all the comments that people talk about him, there he is. Rebounding, right? Rebounding is what you're looking at with him, right? And I'm seeing comments about how he's the best rebounder ever and all that kind of stuff. So how good is he as a rebounder, and what else does he bring to the table?
As a rebounder, I literally cannot think of a single player coming through the draft that has had as high a potential rebounding ratings as he had, both in terms of as a combined package. It's just, you know, it's phenomenal, and he also brings really good shot blocking as well. He'll be a very good shot blocker. Uh, his defense will not be as stellar a rating as some of the other truly defensive bigs, but um, Brooklyn was kind of in a tough situation uh, with that spot because they were really hoping to get, I think, either Lebesere or uh, uh, Greek Papa to fall to them so they could have the offensive complement to put next to Miles Turner. But because those two players' stocks rose so high, they were kind of like, I think they were kind of caught in a situation where they were like, okay, now what do we do? And perhaps there was
So I think Tim's got cut off there. Yeah, I mean, I think looking at Siakam, he certainly could be the best rebounder in the league. So we'll see how he does. Whilst waiting for Tim to come back, I just wanted to update with some live news. So the 29th pick has been made, and Davis Bertans has been selected by Denver. Understand that that's going to be part of a trade. Andre, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, what are my thoughts on that? I can't say that I scouted the guy, or at least maybe I did, but I didn't particularly look into him deeply, so I wasn't particularly interested in him. Let's see where he is on our.
So I think if I remember, he had quite a good youth league, and he's was quite. I think he was a shooter and not much else, if I remember.
Looks like
Okay.
field goals, jumpers, and threes handling. So he is a power forward with some good handling, but it doesn't do much else according to this one anyway. And look at his rebounding, 18, and wow, that can't be right.
Yeah. Yeah, it screams out a possibly a 2 or a 3 in a 4's body. So
yeah.
Interesting. I wonder where he's heading. I'm not got any details on that trade yet, but we'll see. So if we go back, so just whilst waiting for Tim, we'll pick up that discussion in a bit. But the team that I'm think has had a really good draft has been Boston. So if you think of the players they've already got, so they've already. I mean, I don't know whether Conley's going to stay or whether he's been traded, but just looking at the roster they have now, so just to give you a flavour, so they've got Conley, McLemore, Gordon and Anderson as sort of their main players, really. But they've just added Trice, what's his name, Papagiannis from as a centre, and I can't remember, Gabinji, the wing that they've added. So for a team that sort of was in the playoffs, won 49 games last year, I think they've added a hell of a lot to their roster for next season.
Where did I get cut off?
Sorry. So we were talking about Siakam, Brooklyn, I believe, and you kind of cut off halfway through there. We're just sort of talking about Boston at the moment.
Something went cut me off. So I don't know where I was in the middle of my talk about.
I can barely hear what you're saying.
Yes, I think he's struggling with signal a little bit. So yeah, that's for me. Boston, I think, is the one that has had a good draft so far.
Yeah. Well, look, they took what, the Greek guy, they took Trice, then they took
Gabinji later on, 22.
Gabinji and Isaiah Cordinier. So yeah, so look, there's some of the top defensive wings, best defensive point guard, and the big man that he really wanted, right? So he's updating his defense quite dramatically after this draft. And let me see, did he need it much? He already had a few decent defenders on the roster. As you said, maybe some of them are going to be traded. So
yeah, I think so. I think if Trice is coming in, I think it's almost certain that Conley's been traded for something.
But is Trice ready to play now?
I think it depends on what direction Boston are going. I think if they're looking to get playoffs again next season, Trice needs a bit of settling in, possibly. It might be one of those where they'll keep Conley and Trice and then trade Conley as the season goes on, as soon as they've sort of got enough wins to guarantee themselves or give them a shot of a decent playoff seed, possibly. Yeah. I think Trice should be solid enough as the season goes on. So the other thing that I've just seen is that we've also had the 30th pick as well. So Miles is going through all of these selections. So he's just drafted Trevion Jackson from the University of Wisconsin. So it sounds like, I don't think that this one's being traded. I'm just sort of looking at it now. I'm surprised that this guy hasn't gone a little bit higher. I mean, he's a little bit undersized for what he will be, probably as a shooting guard, but he had quite a good youth league. So surprised that he went that low.
Amazing youth league. He's the son of Jimmy Jackson, right? The former Maverick and son, and a pretty good player himself. So yeah, scorer. It probably makes sense for the draft team to make him into a scorer as his dad. So looks like a decent
I think on Denver he's gonna have loads of shots next season. So I think he'll get plenty of opportunities to show himself in this league. But with the 30th pick, that's
a little bit heavy. So we'll need some time to drop weight, but he's not much of a defender anyway. So I suppose it doesn't really matter.
No. I think he's, in the end, when all is said and done on his career, he's probably going to be an impact scorer from the bench. But in Denver, he's going to probably start, I think, next season. So I think we'll expect to see him put up lots of different points next season. So if we go back to the sort of the first round of sort of selections, sort of we'll sort of have a think about now. So I mean, is there anyone else that that stands out for you on this board, or is there anyone else you kind of want to discuss? I think we talked about best, worst, best sort of franchise that's had the benefit of this draft so far. But is there anyone else that sort of stands out for you that you sort of think's a good selection, or sort of wonder how he's going to fit?
Yeah. I'm just thinking about who we didn't talk about. Well, based on my scouting, right, and I had a full report on this gentleman, Isaiah Cornier. I see him a lot as a Jordan Adams type of a player, right? So a very, very good defender, even decent handling, but not necessarily a good shooter at all. So I was wondering why he slipped so far, right? Considering that the league is very much obsessed with defense these days. So what do you think? What happened there with him?
Yeah, so I mean, I did consider him at 23. He was alongside Ingles. If Ingles wasn't there, I'd certainly take him at 23. But for me, I think looking at his report, the bit that worried me was that he was a guy who was able to draw fouls really effectively, but he was really, really bad at the free throw line.
Yeah.
So my thought there was that if he's going to be drawing contact that much, he needs to be able to put the ball in the bucket, really, in the basket. So that's what put me off him. I think certainly he will have a good season in Boston, and he'll probably be one of those guys that we look at the end of next season and wonder how on earth he ended up at 26. Because looking at some of the guys above him, he's certainly going to be a better player than them, in my opinion. I don't know what you think. I mean, did you scout him?
Yeah, I did. I had a full report on him, and I saw him as a very, very good defender, but I didn't see much else, as far as I remember, anyway. And that's why I obviously I had an opportunity to draft him at 19, and I had three wings that I was really looking at. That would be Gbinji, Ingles, and Cordonier. And his defensive rating, I think, based on my scouting anyway, is the highest one, and he also has pretty decent blocks. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I
He will
think
be an impact player.
Yeah, it's certainly been an impact player, and he's one of those that, like you said, the league, there is value in defensive players, certainly, and he will always have value, I think, in this league. In comparison to probably someone like, if we go back to the Beasley situation again, obviously being in Phoenix, his value is probably going to go up anyway. But if he was on another team that wasn't utilising him effectively, because he's just a pure offensive player, his value would probably diminish quite a lot in comparison to Cordier. I think his value will stay if he is effective, certainly. So I think the only guy that we haven't really talked about is probably because he's at the bottom of this board. Obviously 28, 29, 30 have been picked now, but Gary Payton 2, the son of Gary Payton, picked by Detroit. I'm not sure whether that's a trade or whether they've actually selected him, but do you wonder whether that's a genuine selection by Detroit, with considering their backcourt is already pretty loaded?
Okay, and who do they have in their backcourt? Let me have a quick look. Obviously Kemba, but who else in there in the depth chart? We have. Well, you see, they are and I remember last year when I was preparing for the game against Detroit. I obviously played them twice, and we were 1-1, each winning home game. I saw that backup point guard was a challenge for them. And let me see, they didn't have an injury, but they were playing Micic, who is obviously a decent player, but certainly not at Detroit's backup point guard expectations. I suppose he has good passing, but for me, below average handling and no defense at all. Right, so I don't have. Or at the time didn't have a scoring point guard, so I didn't, or I couldn't take advantage of his lack of defense. I even tried to slot in Middleton in there, whose handling is quite okay, to see if I could give him some minutes against Micic. That didn't necessarily work out very well. So I think if I don't know if it's a trade or not, but there's definitely a need for a backup point guard in there, and I even think Micic is a free agent. Yeah, he is, right. So he's similar situation like me. No, he has Kemba, but he doesn't have a backup point guard. So maybe Peyton will get the minutes there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if he's not traded, then certainly. But
Yeah.
just for me, Payton was a guy that I had probably going. Well, not that many picks down. I probably had him going in sort of from pick 29 to 34, I think. I can't remember who I had instead of Payton for Detroit. He's probably not been selected yet, so I probably can't talk about him. But I had another guy who I think they could have got, who would have had more of an impact than Payton. I think the thing I find difficult to understand is obviously, so they've also got Walker, and he'll play the majority of the minutes. So Payton is probably only going to play, what, 12 minutes at most in the season?
Yeah.
I mean, for someone who's going to play 12 minutes, they could have certainly got that, I think, in free agency. See how that pans out.
Well, Payton is, if I remember correctly, is quite old also for a rookie, right? I think he's 23 now. So that may mean that he's quite developed. Yeah, he's 23.
Yeah.
So
no, I mean, he's a solid player, don't get me wrong.
Yeah. And look, decent handling,
Yeah.
decent passing, right? Not a lot of scoring, but he doesn't need scoring, I suppose, there. And plays some defense. So maybe he can come in and step into the backup point guard spot straight away.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. I mean, we'll see. I think certainly he can step into the backup point guard position and do that comfortably. It's just a shame. I think it'd be nice to see Payton somewhere like Denver, because I think he might have actually got some starting minutes in Denver.
Yeah.
But obviously Denver have traded their picks below anyway, so that probably wouldn't have happened. But yeah, so I think we've covered pretty much everyone who's been selected in one way or another. So I think Tim's had some technical problems, so he's had to jump off. But we'll sort of wrap up now. I just want to say thanks for joining us, Andre. And obviously we're heading into the second round now, where the pick should happen a little bit quicker with the being sort of 1 hour time slots.
Hopefully.
I think I've just heard of a trade that's probably going to mean that Washington's going to get quite a lot of picks in the second round. So we'll see what they do with that. But just want to say thanks for joining us, Andre and Tim. When you listen back to this, thanks for joining us as well. It's been really interesting to see what your thoughts are on the first round so far.
Okay, thanks for having us, and just wanted to shout out to the draft team for the very impressive draft, and we're looking forward to more in the coming years.
Yeah, certainly been the most unpredictable draft I've ever been a part of. So definitely shout out to them for getting the balance right. Definitely.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thanks.